Okay, boys and girls, this is going to be the second installment of Unit 2's review of graphs. What we covered in the last video was frequency tables, right? And so what I'm going to be covering right now is pretty much all the other graphs that are going to be discussed in Unit 2. All right, so we begin right here with a circle graph. And for obvious reasons why it's called a circle graph, what you do is you find out what kind of percentages are these different labels, and then you apply that percentage to 360 degrees, and you create a circle graph. It's pretty self-explanatory, and if it comes down to a multiple choice question, this one would be pretty gosh darn easy to figure out which one is which. So I'm not really that concerned about circle graphs and your ability to understand them, read them, et cetera, et cetera. Circle graphs, this is what it is. Okay, this next one is a Pareto chart, a Pareto. I think it's P-A-R-E-T-O, Pareto chart. I could be misspelling that first word, but a Pareto chart. What a Pareto chart is like a bar graph. So you notice that they're all bars, but a few unique things. First and foremost, these bars very specifically all go downhill. Okay, they all go downhill. So that is a huge part of the Pareto chart. And also notice that in these Paretos that there is a gap in between each one of the bars. All right. Okay, so there's a gap in between the bars, and that makes a Pareto. So also another thing that you'll notice is that these values down at the bottom here aren't usually numbers. Okay, so we're going to be seeing some other pictures here that look similar, but you notice how the bottoms are numbers. These are more categorical, you know, so it'll be like coffee, tea, water, people who took the bus, people who drove a car, people who walked, those sort of things. It's not so numerical, it's rather a category of itself. And also, no matter what we're talking about, what kind of picture that we're talking about when we go through these things, one thing that I'm kind of purposely ignoring, but I'm going to mention for sure right here, right now, is that these side values are the values in which the table is trying to teach you about. So here, when we're talking about numbers like 0, 5, 10, 15, these are probably the frequency, the number of things. Like, so for instance, this would be like 30 people drink coffee, 23 people drink tea, 20 people drink water. So that would be like a frequency, where when we're looking at these other things, notice how these numbers change. But again, this has to match what the question is asking for. This kind of sidebar would be something that is probably more related to relative frequency, where they're like a percentage written as a decimal. So this would be like a relative frequency in this situation. Okay, so again, Pareto charts, the bars are separated. Okay, the bars are separated and they go downhill. Okay, next one. This is one that we used quite often in many of our different topics, and this thing is called a histogram. Histogram. And what a histogram is, it's a bar graph, but notice how the bars are touching. Okay, so notice how the bars are touching. That makes a histogram. Oh, and also because of the bars touch, this bottom thing has to be a measurable thing. So this x-axis here has to be numbers. So you notice that between bar 1 and bar 2, they both simultaneously meet up at 16.5. Okay, so this would often be used in reference with a frequency table or something like that. Okay, So a histogram, bars touch, and notice how the bars can go uphill, they can go downhill, they can go, whatever they need to do to match whatever value these things are to be done. So this is done in chronological order, and this is the dependent value that is related to it. So that makes a histogram. Histogram, bars touch, and again, just make sure that this side bar over here is what you're supposed to be talking about, whether it be frequency, relative frequency, whatever it is. Make sure these values match up with what the question is asking for. Next, this is with all these dots all scattered around. They're just randomly scattered. This is a scatter plot. I'm not sure if it's one word or two. I'll make it two. Whatever. It's a scatter plot. And so scatter plots, you'll be given like pretty much like an XY table or an independent dependent kind of table. And so you'll be given coordinates of each one of these dots, and you would just, in essence, graph it on the picture to make a scatter plot. Notice that dots can be, vertical of each other. They can be, I guess I don't have an example, but they can be horizontal of each other. They can do whatever they need to do. They can go frontwards, backwards, wherever a particular dot is supposed to be plotted, plot that point, and it's all good. Notice how you do not connect these things with lines or anything like that. So a scatter plot is just a scattering of dots plotted where they're supposed to be. Last but not least is a picture that looks like this, which is a time series. This is a time series. Time series. So this bottom, this dependent variable is some version of time. So here, this happens to be days of the week, but it could be hours, it could be months, it could be years or whatever. But in a time series, notice that it is going to absolutely have a time component on here. Boom. And the time component goes on the bottom. Okay. The measurable bit, the independent event of it, or excuse me, the dependent variable is just measured out. So Sunday we had 5 of somethings. On Monday we had 3. And so these dots come in chronological order. And then notice how they are absolutely joined up by a line. And that makes a time series a time series. All right, so kind of rushing through this one more time. Note that these are going to be, again, multiple choice questions. So it's not about creating the proper picture. It's more about identifying the incorrect ones and just selecting the correct one from the incorrect ones. So a circle graph, again, is a circle. Not a big deal. Circle, it goes around. Pareto, bars are separated, goes downhill. Make sure these side numbers are what they're supposed to be. Again, histogram, bar graph, but the bars touch. All right. This again is what it's supposed to be, whether it be like relative frequency, whatever the value happens to be. Make sure that these side values are what they're supposed to be. Histogram, bars touch. Scatter plot, it's a scattering of dots. It's a scatter plot. You just plot these dots scattered at whatever values you're supposed to. And last but not least, time series. Time goes on bottom. And then, so it's a lot like a scatter plot, but it has some version of time. And notice how the dots are absolutely connected. Oh, last thing. Notice how there is not a line connecting down to the origin. Like a lot of times kiddos want to create this line for some weird reason when it shouldn't actually exist. So note that this doesn't necessarily connect with the bottom. All right, that is the second video, and you should be squared away with Unit 2 after this video. All right, have a good day, everybody. Keep smiling.